Welcome back to another episode of Hammering Down. I'm your host, Kaylor Hodges, and it's been a minute. I haven't talked to you guys since literal Christmas Day. I thought I was going to come out with another episode, and then I didn't because it's been a slow news week. I could talk about us selling Marlon Santos to IKS. I would try to pronounce the Israeli name. It's better if I didn't. I could talk about that, but we've known about this for about 3 months or 3 weeks at this point. So this is a known issue. I can dive more into that later on, but that's not what we're here for. Today, we decided to do something a little bit different. And I put out a little feeler about what people would want to listen to. And I got a message from Clay and Lee on this Twitter post. So follow me on Twitter if you want to be involved with that at Kaylor Hodges. And it's basically, where does the USL fit in the global landscape? And on top of that, where does the academy system fit in the global landscape? And to join me talking about this, because I've talked for a whole minute without introducing him, it's someone who's been on here for several times now, doing drafts, talking about Lou City, talking about just anything that comes up. He is on Soccer City, which is in ESPN Louisville. He gets to talk on the radio, once a week. So kind of a smart dude, trusted around. He's on State of the Lou podcasting, which he needs to get back to doing more of those, and writing all the dang time. I'm talking to Benton Newman. How you doing, man?
Doing great. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I agree with you. It's kind of been a slowish off season. I've been using that opportunity to explore the interest, but like just this week, I feel like at least on the Louisville City side of things have really started to pick up. So I'm very much getting back into that soccer mode of things and eager to talk about soccer again more
Yeah.
regularly.
I mean, you already have 2 friendlies to look forward to. You have like 17 new players to talk about. Um, and I talked about this on the USL show and I got a little bit of heat for it. Lou City has the biggest squad in the USL, and then they decide to release and let like 3 players retire, and then they sign 7 more. And it's like, all right, how big a squad do you need? But you know what? I mean,
We
that's
no,
why
we
they can.
we've only gotten 2 new guys this time. Last year was our big time. We had a lot of big turnover. This time, a few guys depart. Corbin retired, and we're largely just plugging those holes. But yeah, I think overall we do have a deeper bench than a lot of teams, which I'm really appreciative of, especially on the racing level side. That coach takes a very opposite approach, which makes me very nervous, and I don't agree with. But I'm not a professional coach, so trust the
Well,
process. We'll see how it pans out.
I mean, we look at Legion, that's what I talk about here. When you look at the top 14-minute receivers in for the Legion, 2 of the players didn't finish the year with the team. They left the team in May, and they were still in the top 14 in minutes. So we don't spread around the wealth at all. We bring on a couple of people and then just say, all right, Johnny Dean, run the entire time. The fact that he was the only infield player to go every single minute of the USL season and the Open Cup and the playoffs is insane. The only other one was what's his name? Oh my god, I'm blanking on his name now. He was at El Paso, the goalkeeper there. He played for Evan Newton. There we go. It was Evan Newton and Johnny Dean were the only 2 Ironmen. So it's like, all right, let's hope he doesn't get
Hard
hurt
to do.
because,
Yeah, right.
huh? Yeah. So
It's hard to do that.
yeah.
Like
So
Sean Tosh probably would have been an Ironman again this year, but like he had a rough start to last season, so he didn't quite see the same minutes in the beginning, but by the end he was getting them pretty regularly. He's been an Ironman in the past for us, but I think it's different. Because he plays more centrally. Johnny Dean, he plays out wide, right?
yeah, he's our right back.
That's what I thought. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes it a little different. You do a bit more running and stuff on there, so that makes it a little bit more impressive.
Yeah.
The amount
So
of mobility.
what I wanted to get into was, first off, I want to talk about, where does the USL sit? Because you started going down to this rabbit hole because Lucy just signed a new Danish player. and you're trying to figure out where does everything sit. And it was around the same time I started researching the same thing. And there's a pretty common website that people like to go to, and it's 538. And 538 kind of accidentally predicted last year's USL champion in San Antonio FC. I say accidentally. You could say, well, they were geniuses. The only reason that they were projected to do so well is because they signed a former MLS fullback who, again, I am blanking on his name. He played for FC Cincinnati, fast as all get gone, but he only played. He didn't play a single minute for him, but because he had MLS minutes, he pushed up their ranking, and they were the top team in the USL. And then he didn't play a single minute for him, and so it was like they picked the right winner, but they didn't. Good on them, I guess. But they are they're a legitimate website that does a whole lot of math, that tries to predict where everybody fits in. And I think I have come to the conclusion of where the USL sits. So I think I've got it. I think I figured it out. So I mean, when you were looking though, what kind of did you find when it comes to where things kind of sit in the global basis?
Well, yeah, to start with 530, yeah, that's exactly where I went. I was looking at their data. I'm assuming that all this is going to be based off the assumption that they're directionally accurate, which I think is right. I have gripes and issues with 530. I certainly don't think they're perfect, but I think they are super smart. And Nate Silver, who does 538, he got his start in sports. Like, he worked with ESPN for a long time. So if there's any area he's going to get more right than others, I mean, we know that his 2016 prediction stuff went
Yeah.
for the football picks. But um, but so I'm operating under the pretense that his ranking methodology here is directionally accurate. And you're right. This all stemmed from our signing of Rasmus Selfson. Still got to learn that name.
Mhm.
It came from from the Danish top division, and we provide these stats like goals and assists and stuff like that. And I was thinking, like, I don't know what to make of this at all. Like, how does this translate to our league? How do these compare? So that's where I got the rabbit hole, and now and that's where I got 538's data, and they have this SPI sort of calculation. Not going to get into that, but basically just kind of a calculation and number to help like rank these things. So the league he came from was the Danish top division. Their average like score for each of the teams there is just about 40-41 on their scale. For context, the USL is closer to 17. Now, on paper, that sounds like a big gap, but when you kind of look at the range of teams, like, you got to think, like, we have some real deep bottom feeders. Our weakest team was New York Red Bulls 2. They scored a whopping 4, which is horrible. They're very much dragging things down. But when you look at like the top of things, you start looking at the specific clubs. Tampa had the highest at 29.7, Louisville City 26.4, San Antonio 26.2, Birmingham 25.8. Like, all high numbers. The club that this guy came from that we just got, Linkby, I don't even know if I'm saying that right. It's a team that's they got promoted last year. They're going to get relegated from their division, so they're kind of the worst at. It's a 25.5. So the the top of our league and the bottom of their league, like, they're pretty darn close to one another. And when you look at the full context of all these leagues and the averages, the MLS and the Danish league are real close to one another. I think there's a tiny slight edge for the MLS. Now, I mean, again, take these numbers with a grain of salt, because anybody can beat anyone on any given day. Like, we've seen that in the US Open Cup. Like, our upper half teams can beat some of these MLS sides, not just the lower halves, but up there. So, why the number sounds wide between these two specific cases, or even with the MLS, I think competitively, like on the field, it's close. Like, I think our good teams can compete and would hold their own in some of these other leagues, which is really cool to see. Again, and I don't have much else to go on, so I'm kind of relying on these SPI numbers that could be somewhat accurate. But I mean, just based off of what we've seen in the US Open Cup, like, if you're comparing MLS and USL, like, it seems relatively accurate. So I don't know, like, does that kind of align with the vision of what you had kind of thought going into this as far as where the USL stacks up against some of these bigger leagues?
Yeah, so where I was kinda sitting was I didn't really know because like you said, we've seen cup sets. I mean, heck, the day we're recording this, Wrexham beat Coventry, County, 4-3 in the FA Cup, right? That's a 5th tier team versus a 2nd tier team. Seems like it
Oh, I
should
didn't realize
be.
Coventry was in the championship.
Yeah, they're gonna be relegated, though. I mean, they are in massive financial trouble.
Yeah. Yikes.
If you thought the other Birmingham City, Birmingham City were in rough financial shape, listen, Coventry is bad, bad. Um, so they are I mean, they got beat 4-3, and that was a big deal, obviously, because that's a 5th tier team versus a 2nd. A couple years ago, I can't remember which team it was, but I think it was a 8th tier team in the Vanarama South, took on or North took on, Tottenham, and that was a top tier team versus an 8th tier team. We see cup sets like that, but does that mean will any day the Vanarama National take on a Premier League team and beat them regularly? Absolutely not. That's just not how that works. Same for the US Open Cup. We had League One teams like Union Omaha go down there and just absolutely wipe the floor with some MLS teams. Heck, a USL Championship team, Sacramento, goes all the way to the finals. We've seen that, but what does that mean, right? And so I started off my journey with, these 538 rankings are a great way to kind of go about it. So, but I also wanted to look at the adjustment for the numbers, right? And let's just talk about the part that people don't want to talk about, and that's the budget, that's the wallet, the finances, right? Yeah. So, now I want to say this. This is allegedly. Now I have pretty good sources on this, and I'm not going to out them, nor will I say the players that were involved. But allegedly, the highest paid players in the USL Championship were paid $500,000 a year. Now, a lot of times in soccer, we like to break things down into these per week numbers. It Why I don't really know. Guys like Mbappe, I think, are racking up almost $300,000 a week, which you hear these big old numbers of saying, oh, they're making this much money, per year, and that's like, oh, that's a big number. But the moment you start hearing it per week, boy, is that weird. Um, and I'm going to try to find some people who are making around that number. They're going to be making roughly around 12 grand a week, right? Our top end. So 2, 3 players are making that top end, 12 grand a week. But most players aren't making that at all.
Yeah,
So
I have a hard time grappling with those numbers. I'm not down. You just that's way. I mean, I figured there were some pretty. I figured there's probably a few outliers out there. Like just like there just has to be. But like being that high, that caught me off guard. But yeah, I think the average guy, I think we agreed to, is probably more in the 40 to 60th a year. Um,
yeah,
right? That's kind of
Yeah, so
rough
we're
accurate.
looking around 40 to 60 grand a year being our what we're going to call our average number. In all reality, that's going to be
Mhm.
closer to our, top player, like are going to be making some of those numbers, like guys that you see playing for Louisville City, for Birmingham Legion. The guys who start week in, week out are probably making closer to that number. As opposed
Yeah.
to, granted, again, I don't know finances, right? I don't know. So I'm not going to say I looked at contracts and I could tell you for sure. Now, players like, not saying they do, but players like, Mateo Bunbury for Birmingham Legion, 17-year-old, came off a MLS pro contract, signed a professional contract. He's probably making closer to the league minimum and $22,000 a year. Granted, this doesn't take into effect of housing and medical care and
Mhm.
food care that they get throughout the season. Shout out to the
Yeah. A lot
CBA
of
for
additional
fixing
benefits
that.
these teams get.
Yeah,
Yeah, like the
yeah.
housing and
So
stuff like that's clutch. The food, all the free meals and stuff. The guy I know, at least like the Louisville City like training facility, I think it's so many free meals there. Like that's you can't gloss over that in terms of total compensation package.
Right.
Like that's killer.
So I decided to go on this journey of let's figure out where the league sits financially. And the first thing everybody thinks of, especially in America, you say, well, what about England? Because we see England all the time, unless you're always on ESPN Plus, like I am. You're probably not watching the Bundesliga or La Liga or any other leagues like that. You're probably watching the Premier League because it comes on cable. And when you look at that, let's look at the championship because I wanted to go through all the second division leagues. The championship, the EFL, the second division, their top paid player is Baba Rahman. And believe it or not, this is a guy that plays for Reading. I was a little shocked by that. And he is making $4.6 million a year. That's their top earning player, which is, works out to a lot of freaking money and $89,000 a week. So if we're talking about the average player in the USL, he is making twice their salary in 1 week that they make in 1 year. Okay.
Oh.
So
So for go ahead.
I was going to
I
say, when
was
it
just gonna
comes to financial sides of this, different worlds.
But to your point though, like with the English one, I think is I'm not gonna call it an outlier, but that's the upper end of the spectrum, like skill wise. So
Yes.
going back to the 538's data, I'm going to read off some numbers in the leagues. I'm going to all second league. So the English, the championship, their average like ranking for the teams is 43.78, which is way higher than anything in the and then like the top of the USL. The other like some of the other big leagues, second divisions, the Italian B League, their average 33.7. The French side 33.08. Spanish was 33.21. Germany 31. Like so, you can see there's a huge gap between English and a lot of the other second ones. Now, looking at the rankings of a lot of these second division leagues, like the USL, like a lot of our teams, I think, could be competitive on there. So I would imagine that their financial number is closer. They fall somewhere between the extreme you're talking about there with the championship and then the rough numbers that we've kind of just heard through the grapevine.
Yeah. So, by the way, I just want to throw this out there. The second highest paid player in the English championship is Zach Steffen, who's on loan to Middlesbrough. So the Yanks are taking over. But to kind of talk about how the English game is so inflated, because this is something that gets talked about a lot, with how far things have gone money wise because of Brexit and stuff like that. In order to find numbers that seriously compare to the USL, now granted, this is when stuff starts getting shoddy, right? We're looking at the sixth tier of English football that has the similar numbers to the championship. The Vanarama now North and South, they have similar pay numbers as the USL when you talk about the top of the top. And it's kind of insane stuff because if you look at the Sky Bet League 2, which, is the fourth division, it'd be like us looking at, USL League 2, which is a semi-professional league. Matty Longstaff, who plays for Colchester, is making $24,000 a week, which is still $2,000 more a week than our league minimum is making a year.
Oh, that's crazy because I was looking at something like again the this on the competitive like on field like how they match up. The USL is like ever so slightly behind League One. They're at 20 about 23. Again, we're at about 17. English the League Two there is about 11. So we're kind
Yeah.
of between there, probably closer to League One. But it's interesting about on the financial aspect how it's not like they're not as correlated as I would have
So
thought.
take an example of a guy who came from that division, who came here, Kyle Vassell. He was doing pretty well in EFL League One, came here, um, and we're talking about the prices. I mean, again, these guys are making more than anybody in the USL, and he's coming to a more competitive league while taking a pay cut.
Mhm. Yeah.
Crazy, crazy
It
stuff.
yeah.
So I
You know,
decided to look at
it's
some
it's interesting how
others.
this pans out.
Yeah, so I decided to look at some others, and I'm going to run through these really fast because I wanted to look at the other stuff. So La Liga 2, their top paid player is still making $67,000 per week. Again, that's still more than the average we're seeing in the USL. Okay, well, what if we go to Serie B? Kevin Strootman is making $99,000 per week. He's out with Yanoa, and it's like, it's so much more money a week than people are over double. We're really getting in there on triple. Okay, well, let's look at the Bundesliga too. This one's a little bit closer. Christopher Schindler from Nuremberg, who I think just no, they are knocking on the door for promotion. He's making $27,000 a week. Again, more than our league minimum. And then, we get to, let's see if I can find it. We get to Ligue 2, which hilarious name. I know that it's the French language, but did you see the video that came out from like the beauty
Talking about
pageant where the
the
Miss
Miss
France?
USA or Miss World. Yeah.
Yes.
France.
I was like,
So
why is
good.
this video so long? Please go find it. If you're on Twitter, it's going around.
It's worth it.
It's so good. But Ligue 2, they had Terrence Congolo, who was making, $27,000 a year for Le Havre. We're also, but the US is a little bit closer though, because we're looking at the USL, we're starting to get into their highest paid players are making, these 12,000 a week kind of numbers, which, if the numbers we're hearing are right, are lower than the USL. So they're like bottom. This is going to be a weird sentence. They're bottom of like their top 50 players. So they're like 30 through 50 top paid players are making less than our top three. So we're starting to see a little bit of an overlap. So Ligue 2 and we're starting to see that, which kind of tracks with guys like Kobe Henry going to Ligue 1. Guys like Junior Flemings initially going to Ligue 2, getting promoted into Ligue 1. We do see a translation from the US player or the USL player going to France. Way is over in France as well. So there's a lot of correlation there. So maybe that's where we start to dive into, is that maybe the US second division is a little bit closer to France than, we would have thought a couple of years ago. So that's our first real
Yeah.
sign of correlation when it comes to the money. As for the on the field, I don't think they're incredibly far apart either.
Yeah. No, I agree. And again, if these numbers have any sort of accuracy to them, which I tend to believe, our upper half teams could stay afloat in a lot of these second division leagues outside of the English second division. So the French, German, Spanish, like they could hold their own, like Louisville City, if they all of a sudden were plopped in France, we're not going to have the same win percentage that we're used to, but I think we would be a bit outside of the relegation conversation, closer to the middle than we are the bottom. If that makes sense.
Yeah, so it was a conversation that was had several years ago now, but I had a chance to talk to Chandler Hoffman, who is of, USL royalty, but Louisville City is where he really made a name for himself in the USL. And he talked about it. He said from when I was a kid to now, the USL, he said that the USL is the most competitive second division league outside of the top five. And that was outside the top five leagues. So Italy, France,
Mhm.
Germany, England, and who am I forgetting? Spain. Um, so, and that was 5 years ago. The league has grown a lot in 5 years. The landscape from 2017 to 2022, 18 to 23 coming up soon, is ridiculous.
Night
That
and day.
Yeah, two completely different leagues. And I mean, if you put because Lou City won the championship in 17, right? Or was it 16?
Yep.
It's
17
17?
and 18.
Yeah, okay.
Mhm.
I mean, just to be brutally honest here, 2022 Lou City would kick the crap out of 27 Lou City. I mean,
I 1000% agree. And I was, it's funny you bring that up because I'm midway through a piece kind of like comparing what's the best like Louisville City town, like what's the best sort of year. And part of the factor is I think the level of competitiveness in this league has only gone up pretty significantly over time. So not only like for example, was Louisville City a really good team last season, but the level of competition was that much greater as well, which to me adds that much more weight to the numbers that you see, like as far as goals scored and points earned and all things like that. But yeah, I'm totally with you.
yeah, like guys like Ryan Allen, who is on the USL show with me, has a number for everything, and he does his ELO ratings. And there was at one point that if the game, for the final, sorry, Ben, if the final would have ended in, I think, even just in PKs, San Antonio and Lou City would have finished first and second for the top two teams in USL history. Instead,
Mhm.
the Lou City teams end up falling to, I think, the third or fourth best team in USL history, according to his ELO
Yeah,
rankings. San Antonio
I'm at
absolutely
peace with that.
demolishing that number. And it's insane to talk about how a USL losing team, not like losing, but like a final losing team, was the fourth best team of all time.
Yeah, I mean, if you like look at like some of the top teams, like didn't necessarily like when I mean the San Antonio team, I think is in that conversation for one of the best of all time. Another one I think is in that conversation, but they didn't get the hardware. Was Cincinnati 2018? Like they
2018
were just,
Cincy and
I mean, they were
2000,
like half an MLS side.
yeah. And also I think it was 2019 um Phoenix. They
Yeah.
they did
Oh
really
yeah, yeah, yeah,
well,
them too. Yep,
except they
right
just
there.
didn't get
Yep.
a chance to play. They get a chance to play that final.
Hmm.
So insane stuff to think about. Um, so we keep seeing these teams just get better and better and better and better. So there was going to be a whole section of this where I go through more like the Eredivisie, which is considered to be like a Big Six league, kind of like the AAC likes to call them the Power Six conference or whatever. I'm going to kind of skip over that because the numbers are there. I want to talk about teams that are in our area that are kind of floating around. So I want to go first, and I do believe that this is Norway, the Elite Syrian, which their top player is making $1.2 million. But after that, they are coming down to these half million to 150,000 dollars. They're coming down to these more reasonable numbers with within Norway. So
Hmm.
we're starting to, and I do believe, and you can correct me, that Norwegian top flight and 538 thinks that the top flight of Norway and the second division in the US are pretty comparable as well. And those prices are starting to look a lot similar.
So what I see here is there's a Norwegian Tippe league in. So I'm assuming that's the only Norway one I see here listed on this. I'm assuming this is their top flight. It's just named that. Their average like ranking, their SPI ranking is 33.72. Again, we're 17. Our higher end is just shy of 30. So again, our top end teams could probably stay afloat on the bottom half of their league.
So then we move on a little bit farther, and I want to save my I figured it out, right? But I mean, Croatia, their numbers are, when it comes to their top paid players, are very close to the US's. The top flight of Croatia looks a lot similar to paid players. Once you get into like the top 50, it's pretty much bang on, or from like 30 to 50, it's pretty much bang on with the USL salary. I mean, so
Mhm.
Croatia's right there, and that to me lines up with like Croatian players I talked to. And this is not like for like, obviously, But, Slovenian football, where a lot of these players played, or the Croatian teams, a lot of them are saying, a lot of the Croatian players that come to the US say the USL is just as, if not more competitive than the Croatian teams. The top teams there are insane and they're absolutely demolishing the league. But once you get out of the top two or three, I mean, it's neck for neck.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, again, I think the sport, the growth of the sport has really helped the competitive with the USL. I mean, we're starting to see a lot of great young talent come through, and it's just rising tides lifts all boats. Is that the saying?
yeah, that's it. You nailed it. So I have two more leagues, and this is where I kind of get to where I think that the USL is better than the league I'm going to talk about next, which is the Canadian Prem, who their top paid player is making $130,000 a year. Okay. Which is
Mhm.
allegedly a lot less than half of what our top players are making. And their players are making a lot less than the US. So their number 100th ranked top paid player is making less than the USL league average. And we
Yeah, no,
see with
I would believe it.
and when you look at the competitiveness, I think a lot of people would say that the Canadian Prem right now is closer to USL League One than maybe the championship.
I was gonna say exactly that. I don't have a number from them from 538, but like it's a very like new league. Give it time, and I'm sure they're gonna grow. But right now, currently, probably a lot closer to our League One than the USL Championship. I don't doubt that.
So, yeah, so 31, 32 minutes into this, and I'm going to give you the answer. Where does the USL sit in the world of football? Where do they truly line up? For all the people that left a while back, sorry, you don't get to find out. You didn't hear me say sorry, but whatever. Um,
You got to hear the man out.
yeah, like we need to talk about it. There's always context. If I just told you the answer, then it doesn't make sense. Come on, people. Which the
Mhm.
people that are still listening to this right now, they're like, why are you preaching to me? I'm here. Um, but it's the Australian A League, the top flight of Australia. It's salaries bang on. The only salary that is an outlier is Nani. Yeah, that one. um, he's making $1.2 million after leaving
I had no idea
Orlando.
he was there.
Yeah, he went there, decided to take a $1.2 million a year to play for Melbourne Victory, and it's free money.
Yeah,
Which
good for
they
him.
had their whole thing with Melbourne Victory and Melbourne City, with the Melbourne City player getting
Oh
hit. That
yeah,
was that whole thing, but
that escalated.
oh yeah, it did. I mean, the whole context around that, where the A League is essentially falling apart and they can't afford to stay afloat, so they sold off their finals grounds because it used to be like the U.S. where home field advantage gets the finals, but they don't have the money to do that, so they sold it to like Sydney and Melbourne for some kind of whatever sponsorship. That's their
Mhm.
only way of trying to stay afloat. But when you look at the prices that the top flight of Australia, they line up. When you look at players from the USL, the first one that comes to mind right now is Harrison Delbridge. Went from FC Cincinnati in 2018 and went straight over to Australia to play for Melbourne City and went straight into their starting lineup. You look at the prices, and I'm pretty sure if you look at 538, they're pretty bang on with each other.
Yeah, no, you're spot on with that. Their average SPI numbers 19.87. Ours again 17.03. Yeah, so I mean, for all intents and purposes, damn near the same. Right between them is the South American Premier League. Right above the A League, barely, is the English League One. So that kind of gives you a general sense where the Chinese Super League is, well, not right below us, actually quite considerably, 13.45. So a little bit of a gap there, but for all intents and purposes, there's a pretty big overlap. I'd put them all roughly in the same tier. Did you look at
Yeah.
538 before you came up with that conclusion? To know that?
No, I did not actually.
No,
Um,
I thought that was
so
really clever then. Yeah, that worked out perfect.
Yeah, I decided
I
just
agree
to
with that.
look at the prices because, I mean, when you're looking at salaries, for the most part, you can tell quality from salary, which is
Mhm.
not always the truth because, I mean, some people are paid grossly to not do a whole lot. I mean, Dele Alli
Right.
is Besiktas not doing anything. Um, Guys like that, or Eden Hazard, who is miserable at Real Madrid, making a lot of money, who's not doing a whole lot. But for the most part, your people that are making money, they're good. The people that aren't making money are not. And when you start seeing those price tags line up, you're probably going to see a similar output. And
Mhm.
this also works in the English Premier League. The reason that the England's numbers are so inflated is because their broadcast money. They get like $1.2 billion a year just on their broadcast revenue alone. But when you look at the teams that have won the Champions League the most, it's Real Madrid, it's Barcelona, it's Bayern Munich. It's the top of the top is going to be the top, and they're going to pay their players the most. So when you see the A League paying their players the same exact thing, outside Nani, the same salaries, to me, I was like, of course, that makes a lot of sense. They have to be pretty on par.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. The SPI thing is like, pretty specific calculation. You have to be pretty damn smart and have the right numbers to come up with something like that. But a more basic, directionally accurate thing, I think, is follow the numbers. But like you pointed out, there's always going to be some variations there. Players are getting paid a lot to not do a lot. It might also come down to the economics of the country or region in which these leagues are played. That's definitely going to be an influencing factor. But looking at the number compared to the play on the field, like it's a fairly good quick barometer to have. And then again, I think the Australian A League and the USL are pretty perfect points on that, because all things seem to indicate they are almost one and the same.
Yeah, and so kind of going from there, figuring out where the league sits in the global sphere, one of the things that the USL has been elite at, and Lou City falls beautifully in there, is the academy, right? The academy systems in the USL, the teams that are doing it right are doing it right. I mean, San Antonio sells Gallegos off, I think, to the Danish league for $500,000. Not bad for an 18-year-old. Damas
Mhm.
goes off to Sweden for a lot of money. We get, obviously, he didn't go through an academy. Audrey Berry goes off for $800,000. We saw Jonathan Gomez. That whole situation was weird, but still a lot of money to come out of the Louisville City Academy. Joshua Winder is currently training in Europe right now, and is going to be worth a lot of money. We're seeing,
It's
Kobe
six figures
Henry.
right there.
Yeah. And Kobe Henry also went over to Ligue 1 after coming out of the Orange County system. Like, when it comes to the US, you're looking at these top academies like your FC Dallases, you're looking at your Philadelphia Unions, you're looking at your Louisville cities, your Orange counties, and kind of with San Antonio as well. Those
You gotta give
academies,
Red Bull some respect.
Red Bull as
Red
well.
Bulls historically have been good.
They have. Recently, not as much. I mean, it's kind of the what have you done for me, lately kind of world. But I mean, yeah, when you look at the
Yeah.
players that they've put out there, I mean, heck, you could throw guys like Junior Flemington into that mix because he was a Red Bulls
Mhm.
Academy guy. Um, you can throw, obviously, their endless list of players that are out there playing now. I mean, if you decide to look at that 2016 Baby Bulls roster, um, that
Doing
roster
big
could
things.
legitimately compete in the Champions League.
It was
It's
good. Very
ridiculous.
good team. Yeah,
um,
it aged well.
yeah, really well. So when we're looking at these academies, from your perspective of being in the backyard of one of the most respected academies in the US, what do you see that might be different from what people might think of a USL academy?
Um, I think a big part of it is cultivating a professional atmosphere there to kind of lure in some of these top talents. I don't want to wade into the debate of like just top athletic people and like getting them into like the sport. You know, you see these dumbass graphics of like top NBA stars, like where were they playing soccer? Like I get where they're going. It's I mean they're off base, but I kind of get like what they're talking about. Like I'm not gonna say all athletes are interchangeable, but like the more we can attract young people with with athletic promise to the sport, I think that the more output we're going to see from these academies. And I think we're always starting to see the fruits of labor. And it's so early. I'm so obsessed with the academy concept, and I think that can really be the USL's bread and butter. And we're just scratching the surface of that. And again, you got clubs like USL, I think, are help really paving the way. We've already had a few uh, first team outputs. And the first few years, these guys have only been for a relatively short time training with the academies. Now we got a full on pipeline where
Yeah.
if we come back and revisit this conversation 10, 15 years, like it's going to be insane the level of the number of professional soccer players that we're going to see coming from Louisville, and you're going to start seeing in other cities too, Birmingham, San Antonio, etc. And I think
I'm
it's
gonna
really going to elevate the status of the league. But I
I'm
think
gonna
a
go
big
ahead.
part of it is
I
good.
was just gonna say I'm gonna go ahead and bang the drum now. Mark down Lexington as the next big hot spot. When I talked to
Hmm.
Sam Stockley, who is the head coach and the director of um, Lexington, their idea of having 75% of their roster being homegrown talent, like, duh. I
I
mean,
love it. Love it.
I mean,
Bring it.
the thing that I noticed, and I wanted to see how you felt about this, there's something about just letting the kids play.
Oh yeah, I mean, give them an opportunity to show. It's like it's one thing to see people like practice and train and get a sense for them. It's another thing to put them in like an actual game setting and letting them go. I think that you could see a lot of pleasant surprises of that. And so I love Lexington's ambition to have a largely homegrown team. I think it's excellent. And I grew up in the northern Kentucky area. I spent a number of years in Lexington because I went to UK and now I live in Louisville. So I got a pretty good exposure to just like Kentucky in general. It's like everybody has played soccer at one point in their life, and I don't think it's the same. That's the case for everywhere in the country, but at least I know in roughly the region in which I've grown up, it's always been a big thing. But in the past, like when I was that age, there didn't seem like there was much you could do with that.
Yeah.
Like if you're talking about football, for example, yeah, you go play college ball, it's a huge thing. Then you can go play in the NFL, and like there's a pathway, and that pathway to the pros hasn't honestly really existed until the past like 5 to 10 years, like on a more grand scale. Now, kids these days, they can see that pipeline. They can see the steps that it takes to get to these highest levels, and I think that's enormous. And part of that, again, like I was saying before, is building an atmosphere that gives off the impression of being professional. And that's one thing I think Louisville's doing right is the infrastructure that they've put in place, the training grounds and whatnot. It's like very concrete and permanent, visible thing for these young players to look at and know what they can go through and play. And
And
that's one thing I appreciate about what we've built here.
And I think that's one thing that I think a lot of Legion fans want to see more of around here. Talking about the city of Birmingham, the talent here is undeniable, right? I mean, when you think about our first and only roster or academy graduate being Jaden Cervania, he's over at North Carolina FC, and he is a Puerto Rican international coming from our own backyard. That's huge,
Mhm.
right? But let's look at other guys. JJ Williams came from, Montgomery. He played off in Phoenix and is going to be signing for, Tampa Bay very soon. That's a very, very good player that came from around the 205 area. But you also look at other players that have gone off to do great things from Birmingham. Braden Cervania got several caps for the U.S. men's national team, is playing I think with FC Dallas right now, Chris Richards from the 205 from Birmingham, Alabama, was signed by Bayern Munich, went to FC Dallas, and is playing for Crystal Palace right now. You have other guys like Tanner Tessman from the 205 from Birmingham, who went to, again, FC Dallas, because FC Dallas loves to poach from here, and has sent him off to Serie A, who Venezia got relegated. But I mean, he's with Venezia right now, playing in Serie B, playing Serie A, got some U.S. men's national team time. You're seeing these guys come from Birmingham who, between all those people, I mean, you're looking double digits U.S. men's or international caps. And that's huge. And I think a lot of Legion fans are like, why aren't we doing more of this? It takes a while to set up this system. I mean, we just started seeing Lou City really benefit from this last year, 2 years ago. When was the Jonathan Gomez deal done? Last year?
Yes, yes.
Um,
Mike, when did he leave?
2021?
Yeah,
2021?
yeah,
Yeah. And that by that point, Lou City had been around for 7, 8 years. It
yeah. I
takes a
mean,
while.
we're pretty quick on it. It does take a while, but and eventually, I mean, you guys will get there to have more of the infrastructure and be able to pull in and develop more players. But like, think of it this way: like, you guys have already had that output, and it's early. Like, just in the grand scheme of the USL and the output that they've had just on young players, it's early. It's only going to get bigger. It's going to get a lot bigger too, and I'm so excited about that.
Not an academy guy, but two young players that I know a lot of Legion players want to see is Matthew Corcoran and Matteo Bunbury. Matthew Corcoran is still considered to be the best U16 player in the U.S. If you look at a lot of those U16, U17 lists, Matthew Corcoran is up there. He is a young
He's
talent. That's
Did you see that
what.
kid that you guys signed that hurt his leg, so we didn't get to see much of him?
Um.
Was it his leg he hurt?
Ye-
I know you guys had signed some young exciting guy, but he had suffered for injury, so I don't think we saw a
Oh,
lot of
yeah,
him
yeah.
last season.
Matthew was hurt for a little bit of the season. It wasn't he wasn't really gonna get a lot of playing time last year, but with Zach Caravo gone, and Bruno Lapa gone, some tells me that he's gonna get a lot more chances in the midfield. Guys like
Yeah.
Anderson and Theodore slot in. Not Mateo, but Matthew Corcoran slots in and probably plays a whole lot more minutes. Matteo Bunbury got a lot of minutes. I say a lot, relatively a lot of minutes. He's a young Canadian player who I legitimately think could be a Canadian international. He has that kind of talent. Um,
Hmm.
and it's still young guys, U18 guys who we're excited about. It's not always about sending these players to college, but Legion have also
Right.
put out, I think, 7 collegiate players in the last 2 years, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. It's super exciting. Everybody's path and journey is going to be different. Some they're going to be ready sooner, and having the that pathway so they can play professionally sooner is excellent. And others, it's a matter of developing them and then letting them go off to college, and then from there they can begin professional careers. And I think that's one interesting thing about the U.S. setup is there's these kind of multiple tiers of opportunity. And at the end of the day, it's just like a larger net amount of minutes available for players, which is super cool.
The one that really excites me, I know this is a primarily men's show, right? But I love to cover the women's game, and Racing Louisville has their issues. We could talk for
Yeah.
hours on Racing Louisville, and I'm going to try to avoid that. But I mean, with them having Racing Louisville too, that's a wonderful pipeline for not only for players to, get a chance at the first team, going from USLW League to NWSL, which, we kind of already seen the beginning of that pipeline with I can't remember her name from Florida State, who forgo her senior year, with when she was at Racing Louisville
Emily
too.
Madrill.
Yes, thank you. Um, but you also see people who get a chance just to go to college. And I wrote an article about it, and I'm going to bang on the drum forever and ever and ever that the college game in the US for women is some of the best soccer you'll ever watch in your life. And for a lot of these girls to get a chance to go to college and play at one of the highest levels that you can play in the world is awesome because it we all wish that the women's game was more respected. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We all wish it was more accepted and it, just like put on this pedestal. But because of how long it was pushed down and how long it was ignored, the game is not quite as high of a level as the men's yet. But that doesn't mean that just because it's college doesn't mean it's good, right? The college game for women is ridiculously good. I beg anybody to go watch any of the Final Four matches that happened this year. They were riddled with talent that will be playing in the Premier, that will be playing in the Women's Super League, that will be playing in La Liga, that will be playing in the NWSL. They were littered.
Alabama made it pretty damn far in that, didn't they?
Semifinals for the first time in school history. I mean, just last year we got our first ever tournament victory, and this year we made it all the way to the semifinals. I mean, right now we have 6 girls that are in the draft. I think 4 of them will get drafted. I think another one of the girls is going to get undrafted, and then the other one's going to go through trial. But that's still 4
Mhm.
drafted players that I think are going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's not an insignificant number at all. And
Yeah.
that's
No, it's not.
still,
In 1 year, it's a pretty good haul.
yeah. But we look at the USLW League, right? Which I have the sneaking suspicion is coming to Birmingham very soon. Um, I do know for a fact that semi pro that the Legion semi-pro team for women is coming. I know that for a fact within the next year or two. I have a very strong sneaking suspicion that it will be USLW League. And with that, I mean, that's another option for the women's game to play at a high level because the USLW League, I've got a chance to watch a lot of women's soccer this year with being on UWS Weekly and following WPSL. The lows of the W League are bad. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The bad teams in the W League were bad, but the top of the W League could beat anybody else in any of the other women's summer leagues easily. They were good.
And you got to think that these teams are, I mean, these leagues, these women leagues are unfortunately still pretty young. They're only going to grow. They're going to get better, more solidified. So I think, the best is yet to come in a lot of these situations, which is super cool. And I was just thinking about this. There's a Freakonomics episode. It was on reparations, and they started by talking about women's soccer. Um, it was about the like Dick Kerr's women's soccer team over in Europe in like the 1800s. It was in England. They were
Mhm.
filling out Goodison Park, like 60K people watching them play. And long story short, the men in charge like of the FA and stuff over there didn't like that how it was hindering the men's game and really kind of stomped that out. And the downstream repercussions of what that's had on the women's game, like how much bigger it could have been by now if it wasn't stomped out by these dudes in the 1800s. But I'm all with you. I want to see the women's these different women's teams in leagues across the world to continue to grow and get a lot more airtime and visibility. So it's a lot of fun to watch. I'm really thankful that we have an NWSL team right here in our backyard again. Not without its problems, but for women to have an opportunity to play and represent Louisville is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, so I talked to McKinley Crone a while back, which she was awesome. She said she was like, my goal is to win the SEC in Alabama. And, she had gone through 5 years of college at that point, got a COVID 6th year. And it ends up being a legendary player with getting the most minutes in NCAA history. She ends up playing a lot of minutes and like I said, she plays goalkeeper, and she said she wanted to win the SEC, and lo and behold, this Bama team goes and does it. I said that they were really good. They ended up being that. But something that she said really shocked me. I didn't really fully understand the history of the women's game as much as I would love to pride myself on. And it was that a lot of these teams, a lot of these top flight teams that we see, oh, Barcelona's selling out the Camp Nou, or we started to see, uh, Liverpool starting to sell out, and Chelsea's starting to sell out, so on and so forth. A lot of teams didn't get a dedicated goalkeeper coach until the last 5 years. And people want to
Yeah,
say
I
the
mean
women's
it's
game, the
sad.
goalkeepers, it's like, oh, the goalkeepers in women's soccer aren't that good. It's because they didn't have a coach. Imagine looking at anybody and saying, "Oh, yeah, uh, Real Madrid, they until 2018, yeah, Courtois didn't have a goalkeeper coach." You'd be like, "What?" If you said that Manchester United did not have a goalkeeper coach until 5 years ago, you'd be calling them tin pot. But instead, it's because, like, they just didn't have the funds because they weren't given them, and that just blew my mind.
Exactly. I mean, think of all the resources that some of these big clubs have over in England. And it wasn't until these past few years that they actually start investing in the women's side of things. It was probably like less than an afterthought up until recently. And it's sad, it sucks, but I'm glad they're now finally getting their time to really shine and start to grow and develop on their own.
And I think
Need
that's
more of
where
it.
the USL is going to start to stand out, especially on the women's side, because Super League is coming. Um, it's super exciting, but I mean the W League is going to give these women a chance to play at college and get noticed by professional clubs in ways that they wouldn't have before. The
Mm.
men's teams, like the USL League Two, the Academy League, they're going to be looking at these teams, and they're going to be getting a chance to go to college, at the very least get a free education. At the
Mhm.
most, they get noticed by a scout and they get to go play here in the US in the USL level, or at the MLS level, or go abroad, go somewhere. And I think that's where a lot of these U15, U16 players, if you're looking at your bets and you say, well, do I want to go to MLS and go to a next pro team? Or do I want to go to the USL? My brain says, if I'm really good, I want to go to the USL, because if you're good, you're playing senior team minutes. If I'm a really good MLS player and I'm just really, really good, and I'm tearing up next pro, I might make the bench for whoever the worst team is. Maybe.
The track record isn't great. I mean, what's honestly like from a player's perspective, what's the difference between MLS Next and USL in terms of like well, how does I mean what I'm trying to get is how does that change the dynamic? We've already seen a lot of these MLS two teams in the USL. Most of those guys never got the MLS time that they should have deserved. Why is MLS Next going to be any different of a situation? I'm totally with you. One thing the USL will always have over MLS Next is the playing time in a more competitive atmosphere against more quality opponents. Their resume is going to look better for that.
I went and watched FC Birmingham take on Atlanta United's academy squad. This was in UPSL. And there was a little bit of an altercation going on between players because Atlanta United's team was playing better than the NFC Birmingham. I mean, frankly, two really unlucky goals
Mhm.
that went in, but they never looked like scoring either. Whatever. Team was getting
Mhm.
frustrated, and one of the players just starts going off, gets into the face of the other player, and the other player for the Atlanta team. They're competing on the same field. They're playing against each other, and the Atlanta United player said, "Bro, I'm 15." And then it was just like, wow. And that's what's going to happen in MLS next. Yeah, it's great that they're pulling all these players from USL that want to get a chance to go to MLS, and that's fair. You take that chance thinking that you are good enough, right? But
Mhm.
the moment you start getting into a physical game and you start having to think about, I'm going in on a slide tackle. I am going in hard on a 16-year-old. And his teammate is 16, and his teammate is 17, and his teammate is 15. You
Mhm.
start to realize that you're not playing the same game when you are 25,
Yeah.
26 years old.
I think you're gonna learn more playing against these more quality developed players, and the USL will always have that advantage. Thankfully, I know a lot of people, they talk about the soccer wars and potentially worrying about the fate of the USL. I think it's always gonna, in some way, shape, or form, have its niche and fill a need that these sub MLS leagues, whatever's to come, won't ever be able to fully fill.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I think if I'm reaching out to any Birmingham parents, right? I'm not going to tell you to put your kids into the Busa Academy, the Birmingham United Soccer Academy. That's me pulling that off the top of my head. I think that's right.
Usa.
Busa. I'm not going to tell you to go to Vestavia Hills, Hoover Soccer, or whatever the HVHS is, because I always forget. There's a lot of letters, people. Call it one thing, please. Like, you don't see me calling Birmingham Legion BLFC. That's weird. Just please make it easier for my tiny brain to comprehend. Anyway, I'm not telling you to go to any of these academies because, frankly, they're expensive. They are. Soccer is a rich
They
man's
play.
sport. It's a rich man's sport and it shouldn't be. And I could go into a long rant about how Legion should be doing more and FC Birmingham should be doing a little bit more. Whatever. But, you know, if I am saying my kid is super talented and I want my kid to get noticed, put them into that Legion Academy system, which happens to be Boost, I think. But put them into that academy system. If they are really the creme de la creme, they are going to rise up to that academy team. And that academy team puts kids in college. And at the very least, your investment got free education. And
Hmm.
you're not going to see that with MLS next. You're just not.
Yeah, again, like, I don't think the MLS next will flop per se. I don't think it's going to grow to what they think it's going to be, which is a literal second league. I think it's going to always be more of that training backup sort of league. That's not what they want, but I think that's what it's going to be. Time will tell.
I'm going to just call it 3.5. Like, it's slightly below League One, but slightly above USL League Two. Like, call it tier 3.5. It falls into a weird place. The players are getting paid, but
Hmm.
was it for? So,
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting.
so look, we figured it out. If you want to go pro or if you want to go to college, go to a USL Academy. And if you're having to choose between going to the Canadian Premier League and the USL Championship, go to USL Championship. We're not biased at all. I think we figured that out today.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we'd
Yeah.
uh, we'd be more akin to people going to the Canadian Premier League rather than the MLS. I kind of anymore view MLS as more of an area of where you go to and you don't develop from, if that makes any sense.
Oh, for sure.
I don't think they see that of themselves or want that to be of themselves, but and a lot of it comes down to the weird regulations and restrictions and stuff in the MLS. Like, think about it: if you're an American attacking player, but you're not like ungodly good, like, that's where those DP slots are going to be used as designated players. I mean, for the most part, all attacking talent. It's hard to compete with some young South
Yeah.
American that's been in some insanely good academy and whatnot. So I don't know, a lot of weird stuff with just U.S. soccer in general, nuances.
This is where I'm going to say this. I know he's not listening. So, Phil, if you're listening to this right now, turn it off. But Diego Luna screwed up by going to Real Salt Lake and not Europe. I mean, El Paso had one of the best, U19s that the US and Mexico are actively fighting over. And he decided to just go straight to MLS where he's not being used that much. I think if he would have waited another year, I think he would have been off to Europe. So,
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for us to say that like these kids they're being offered. I think what's the league minimum MLS? It's like 80 or 90,000 at least, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and it's
It,
hard to say no to that. I'm not gonna
so
tell
one, yeah,
somebody
one aspect
younger
of
than me to not
right,
take the money.
exactly. I mean, we talk about largely purely from like a competitive aspect, from like the thrill of sport. But at the end of the day, those dollar signs mean something, and getting paid 80, 90 to sit in the bench in the MLS versus getting paid maybe 40, 60 in the USL, like some players value that money, others more value the game time, and it comes down to the individual in those situations. And also, I guess
Um,
what they think can happen is long terms. If you're betting on yourself, maybe they bet on themselves to get in that MLS squad. They're not going to play immediately, but eventually will. I don't know.
yeah,
They don't
for
have a great
sure.
track record showing that happens, but
True. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for the TLDR, the USL Academy system is really good, and it's going to be really good, and put your
just the
best
beginning,
players through there. And the USL Championship is just the A League. We did it. We figured it
pretty
out.
much. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Don't make that your tweet headline. Otherwise, somebody's going to listen to us.
I mean, I can put it in there. It's like, what's the most clickbaity way I could put that? Like, the USL is the same as what top flight league? The
You
USL
won't
is better.
believe where we're comparing the USL to.
I put that in some clickbait thing. I'll post it on the USL show account just to get as many weird clicks as possible. And then they'll be like, "Oh, it's that host talking." Never mind. Um, so, um, yeah. Then thank you so much for hopping on, man. I know you have a busy day ahead of you. Um, what's
Thank
some
you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
it's always a blast to talk. Where can the people find you?
You can find me on my website, vamosmorados.com. I'm always spouting knowledge over on Twitter at PurpleSDF because I don't have a lot of faith in Elon Musk's reign over Twitter. I've also started expanding into other spaces, primarily Instagram, which think my handle there is Vamos Morados website or something like that. I don't know. You can find it on my
Sounds
actual
right.
website. A
That
lot of
sounds about
places you can
right.
find me at. I think that's what it
Cool.
is. Again,
I mean that.
I don't usually use Instagram as much, but yeah, don't have a lot of faith in
Yep.
leadership over on Twitter as much as I love Twitter itself.
Yeah, you nailed it. Vamos Morados website. You got it.
So yeah, so trying to expand my horizons a bit. I like to experiment and do different things within this content creator space.
I mean, this is a really weird content creator space that we are living in. Especially with the death of Twitter could be coming, but then it didn't come, and then it's still like on the horizon. And it's like Twitter was such a perfect place for lower league soccer that I don't know what's next, but I'd rather not think about it because that's scary.
Yeah, I guess we go to Reddit. We go to Post. I'm not going to go to Mastodon. I'm not learning that. That's too much work.
I'm I'm not totally against just posting all my articles on Tinder. See how that works out. Like, all
Swiping
right,
on the articles.
yeah, match with me on Hinge.
Screw you.
Which
I'm
is
going to
the
go
one that
back to MySpace. Catch y'all there.
I have one friend there that always has my back. He'll read it. I know he will. Shout out to Tom. Um, but yeah. Yeah, man. That's it. That's it for the show. Thank you everybody for watching. It's been a while since we've had an hour plus long episode, but hey, I always enjoy doing these. I'm trying to figure out other stuff on the back end of things. Um, I'm trying to figure out how to show footage on here and do like draw things out so you guys can see it and figure it out because I'm not good at editing videos. So as long as I can edit things as little as possible, I would like to, but whatever. But thank you
Yeah, talk to
everybody.
John. He's got that figured out with the drawing on the
I,
plays and stuff.
he explained it to me one time and I'm just way too dumb. Like he sat me down and explained it to me and then I looked at it and I was like, I don't get it. He tried. He tried his best. Um But yeah, thank you so much for everybody for listening. Go follow Ben on Twitter and every other space. Listen to the podcast, which is on Stay the Loon Network. Vamos Morados, you can find them there. And read the website. It's really good stuff. Read it. They're really good articles. They're quick hitters that help you figure out all things Louisville, which, believe it or not, is actually important to us as Legion fans. So, yeah, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, guys, keep hammering on.